We pray. Our Father, let thy blessing rest upon us this night. Be with us all this week. In Jesus' name, amen. If you'll pass your music seats in the center. How many of you have never heard me speak before? Put your hands up. Thank you. Tomorrow, as you know, we meet down by the lake at 7 o'clock for meditations and 7:30 for breakfast. And we'll have an address in the afternoon at 4 o'clock. Creative writing at 3, and the art rhythm at 10, and the morning talk at 9, and then the I shall speak again tomorrow evening. Reverend Viscus will speak in the morning. I guess you've had the announcements during the day. And Mrs. Gertrude DeCock will not be able to be here, but we're going to have Dr. Reverend Clifford Richmond of the Chevy Chase Church of Richmond of Washington, D.C., will be here Sunday, and he'll give the evening address. We're counting on a very vital week. It's going to lift us very high. When I was a boy, a little boy of 2 and of 3, I had 3 different prayers. When I was 4 and 5, that my little brother, 2 years younger, would die. And when I was 14 and he was 12, he did step into the other world. It was then that I determined that I must do the work of 2 men. And I have felt that spiritual partnership ever since. When I was 40, I had 3 dreams that I was going to die. When I was 42, that date was even placed. And I was really quite disturbed because that seemed to have had some significance in my life. And then I said to the Lord, if he won't take me into the kingdom, if I could make this, start living in the kingdom right here, would that be all right? And I made a discovery, which I'm going to reiterate during this week, that Lord's Prayer of Jesus, especially that one phrase in it, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, is meant for us really to pray. And from that time on, and for the last 30 years, that's been my central prayer, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. When I was 42, I wrote The Soul's Sincere Desire that launched me into this spiritual work. And the last 30 years, I have been trying to live as the angels live. I'm going to bring in a little of my explorations and see if we can if I can trace the path by which all of you can walk the angel path. For I want to be very frank and very honest. After you have lived to be over 70, you find that life can be a very boresome thing. I'm going to be very frank in saying that the last 30 years I would have been terribly bored walking around on earth. But by flapping my wings a little bit and remembering that I was an angel, I found it quite a thrilling experience. I would like to introduce you tonight into the vicissitudes and the thrills of living as an angel upon this solid earth. Why, it seems to me the laziest, the foolishest thing in the world to wait until we die before we can get in the kingdom of heaven. If all I lived for was just to die so I could be in the kingdom, why, goodness, I think it'd be a whole lot weird. Everybody was lucky that did die. And I just feel we unlucky ones. But I have found, actually, if you walk into the hospitals, in the state hospitals, insane asylums, and all these sufferings of the world, you will find that this earth is not such a pleasant place. That life is not a gift just in itself. Not unless it's a heavenly, unless it has the aroma of heaven about it. When you really make up your mind that it's a place you'd like to escape from, but not through the suicide route, but through the route that Jesus gave. And he put it down very distinctly, and we never really interpreted it correctly. He said, he that would lose his life shall save it. In other words, everyone's lucky that's dead. He came here, he said, to get every one of you dead as you can to the little self and let the real self burst forth. It's exactly the cry of the caterpillar. Oh, that I was dead so I could be a butterfly. And so why wait till we die? Why not just take off the old cocoon and just step out as butterflies right away? A very lovely thing came on the television some time ago. It was told of an angel that came to this earth and got in a traffic jam and got a bump on the head and suffered from amnesia and went around this world day in and day out unaware of his source of life. I've come to the conclusion that every one of you folks that came here are angels, and every one of you, with the exception of just 3 or 4 that were here the first week, are suffering from amnesia. And if you see me prowling around with a big club, you'll know I'm just getting a chance to hit you on the head and wake you up out of the amnesia. And we're going to start that right here tonight. To get cured of amnesia. That's our task. Well, I found in the first place, we were carrying great big heavy loads. Great big heavy loads. For 18 years, I had my wife and I had a great big dish pan under the refrigerator, and every night I would take that out full of water, dump it in the sink, and put it back quick so that it wouldn't drip too much. If we happened to be caught out and stay overnight somewhere, we'd come back, we'd find it overflowed. After 18 years were up, I found that there's a little hole in the floor made there by the carpenters. I went down the basement, found there's a little pipe that took it down to a drain. All I had to do was get a piece of rubber hose about that long and stick it on, and I could have just loafed around for 18 years. I've been carrying an unnecessary load for 18 years. And then I discovered I've been carrying some fears and some little hates for a lot of years. And I found that the way to get into heaven is to throw off that load. And that looked rather like a big job until I made a great discovery that the parents of all the vices, anger and fear are the parents of all the vices. Anger is the parent of all the masculine vices, and fear is the parent of all the feminine vices. When the house is full of flies, like they are sometime down in your southern states, and you just rather give up. But if there's only 2, you get out your swatter. So I got out my swatter, and I swatted fear. I swatted anger, and then I started living in the kingdom of heaven, because that left a vacuum, and in the place where fear was, there came a great trust, faith. Where anger was, there came a great love, plenty of room for it, unlimitedly. And I began to live as an angel. Well, how did I get rid of anger? How did I get rid of fear? I found it quite easy to get rid of anger because I had been associating evil things with persons. I began to consider them like Jesus did, as little demons that didn't have any relationship to the person, that had entered the foreign elements. I never have gotten angry at a phonograph record, but I have gotten terribly out of patience with some of the records that I have heard go on. I've gone into a dining hall, one of these cheap, greasy eating places en route, and somebody put in a nickel. And in the most horrible jazz record. If I'd had an axe, I'd like to chop down the whole machine, and yet why blame the whole machine for one little record? I asked the proprietor why he didn't have another place where he could put in a quarter that would stop all that. Well, I put in a quarter and ended my fears, my angers, as easy as that. I began to consider every person in the world as a perfect being in a perfect world governed by a perfect God. I began to look at every person just as impersonally as I would look at a phonograph of Victrola. And if I was irritated, I'd get irritated at that record, and I'd take the record off and take it out in the alley and break it up, if it is on my Victrola. And if it is on someone else's, I move to another restaurant. But there was a famous shot, a famous marksman, the greatest in the British Army in India. One night, the natives woke him up and said, "Your little baby's been carried away by the Bengal tiger." And with his gun in hand and with the lights and torches and searchlights, they went in hasty pursuit and overtook the great beast at the edge of the jungle. The little baby had been gathered up by its garment and it was unhurt. The Bengal tiger lay coiled there, gazing at those strange lights, his eyes making a perfect reflector and a perfect shot for whoever would take the shot, and yet it was 200 or 300 yards away, and no one was sure shot on that at that distance. And what complicated the matter was the little baby rather was fond of that big pussy cat, and he'd put his head right up against the Bengal tiger's head. And when that lieutenant got down and took careful aim, his hand was trembling so that the natives said, "Let us do the shooting, say him." He said, "No, I'm the only one that's a sure enough shot." And yet his hand trembled. Finally, he pulled the trigger, and by some strange good fortune, he hit the tiger. One day I was left alone to look after my little 3-year-old Helen May, and my wife had taken little Marion, the little 1-year-old, over to the doctor's, and Helen May went into a tantrum. I'd never seen a tantrum. My 3 sisters never had them. I'm sure that this was inherited from a spinster aunt on the mother's side. I begged her to stop. I promised her candy, did everything. Finally, I saw the only way to stop it was to shake her till her little teeth rattled out, or bat her ears back, and then it dawned on me, am I going to hit the tantrum or the baby? Am I going to shoot the tiger or the little girl? And so I tried a stratagem. I turned to the telephone and pretended, holding the thumb on the top, I pretended to dial the neighbors. And then the purely imaginary conversation started to talk to Mrs. Carpenter, where the little 3-year-old pal of my daughter lived, played, and her chief chum, and where her little pal lived. And I said, "Is Helen May over there, my little daughter that plays so often with yours?" "Yes, you know Helen May, she's that sweet little girl that never cries and always bays her daddy, and always especially nice when her mommy's gone." And I just went on, wore out all the terms of eulogy. She's a darling, she's a dumpling, she's a little honey, she's a little sweetheart. Terms I never really used to her face, but here I was talking to the neighbor, and presently the crying stopped, but the mouth was just as wide open. She was staring at her daddy, and some little fingers were pulling at my coattails. "I's here, Daddy. Emmy's here." "Oh, Mrs. Carpenter, my nice little girl has come back." She never had another tantrum. 30 years have gone by. It's the best way to cure a thing is to not to hit the person, but hit the evil. Love the person, but hate the evil. That taught me something tremendous, and you can't get me mad at Stalin. When he went to confess his sins before the priests of his day, he was planning to be a priest. His mother was planning to have him a priest. And he'd tell of his rebellious socialistic ideas, and the priest would pass the word on to the emperor, and he'd be put in Siberia for 7 years, working there with a temperature at 90 degrees below zero. And then another time he's put out there another time for about 3 years. I could hardly blame him for rather thinking the church was corrupt. I couldn't really blame him for thinking that the capitalistic system is just watching every whisper you made about any reform. All I'm getting at is this. The thing to do is to get at the evils, and I've discovered that communism has been hitting against three tremendous evils in our capitalistic system. One is our recurring current hard times, where millions are thrown out of employment, and the only way to save us from an upheaval is to start a war or throw ourselves into one. Well, we don't do it, but Hitler did, and they've done it in other capitalistic nations, and so they call us warmongers. They see the way we lynch the Negro race and won't even ride in the same train with them, and they say, that's the way you treat the dark races. And they have something there. They're mad at the phonograph records we're playing. And in China, they were bitter. They fought us tremendously there. In Korea, we killed 100 Chinese boys, perfectly innocent boys. For every one, they killed of us. And why were they fighting so vigorously? Well, 100 years ago, China abolished the opium traffic, and the British gunboats came in and said, "You're hurting the profits of our British Burma, the Burma poppy raisers, and you've got to put it back." They had wars about it, but the British gunboats were too strong, and so for 150 years they've suffered the most horrible devastation. The first thing the communists did when they came in was to abolish the opium traffic. And I've discovered that that we have 3 million in our slave camps, most torturous camps in the universe, worse than the 3 million in the prison camps of Russia. We call them alcoholics. The alcoholics are suffering from in a hell that goes far beyond anything. One of my young man forged my name, and then he came, and I was going to not press the suit. He said, "I did that on purpose, so you'd get me put in the penitentiary for a couple of years." The only safeguard I've got against that horrible thing. And it's under all our advertising agencies are under the control of the Addiction Trust. You can't open a magazine, but you'll find the gentlemen of distinction drink Calverts. You sit down before a wrestling match in the movies and the television, just what the young men love to look at, and what do you have? Blue ribbon. What do you have? Blue ribbon. What do you have? Blue ribbon. And every avenue of advertisement is under control. Well, over there, the first thing the communists did when they came in is to abolish the opium traffic, and so they're controlled in China, and you can talk all you want about Chiang Kai-shek going back and conquering it. We have had some phonograph records that if we'd taken them off ourselves, there would have been no communism. We don't look at our own selves. And I've written a book on this, on Wings of Prayer, in which I state wherever the Christian method was used, communism was kept out, and wherever we used the force method and the devil method, it came in. And so look at the evils, look at the phonograph records, and then and love the person behind it. Now found that way that fear went, that anger went. Fear, I found, is a little harder. I found it's a whole lot harder. I found that you hardly ever got angry with anyone unless you're afraid of him. We don't get angry at Jamaica. San Domingo can do something we don't like, but we don't get angry. But we don't hate them, but we certainly hate the communists because they're so powerful. And if they were very weak, we wouldn't. Up in the north, we aren't afraid of the Negroes. We'd love to have them in college with us. We'd love to have them go to college, church. 2 or 3 of them come to church with us. Go down in a place where there are 10 Negroes for every white person. They're really afraid. That's largely it. They're afraid of the Negroes. Afraid you give them an inch, they take a mile. But if you'd get together and remove all fears and arrange a proper relationship, an interrelationship, we could block all their hates and all their prejudices. But not as long as fear. So I found fear is one of the great sins. The most dangerous creature in the world is a mother lion or a mother leopard with its babies, and it's afraid of you, and it'll attack. The great big lion, the king of the walk, he can come in almost and pat him. He knows that nothing can hurt. I have found the brave man isn't the one that gets mad easily. The little man, going around the chip on their shoulder, and somebody bumps him, and he thinks that they're insulting him. He turns around, ready to fight. And so, courage is one of the major virtues. And how can you get courage? There's a man in France. He was called Mr. Milk Toast. He was the fraidy cat of his village. But when he was taken into the war, there's the First World War, he went clear through it, and when he came out at the end, he had medals for heroism all over his chest. And when they came to ask him what happened, he said, well, I just looked at it philosophically. I figured that there are 2 alternatives. I'd either be called to the colors or not, and if not, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was called to the colors, there'd be 2 alternatives. I'd either be sent to the front or left in the rear, and if I was left in the rear, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was sent to the front, there'd be 2 alternatives. I'd either be under fire or not, and if not, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was under fire, there'd be 2 alternatives. I'd either be hit or not, and if not, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was hit, there'd be 2 alternatives. I'd either be hurt seriously or mildly. If mildly, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. If I was hurt seriously, I'd either get well or die, and if I got well, there'd be nothing to be concerned about. And if I died, there'd still be 2 alternatives. Well, that lifted me a bit, but that's a little superficial. It wasn't until I began to have palpitation of the heart that would waken me every night. Continued for years. It wakened me with the most frightening state. In the middle of the night, you have a tendency to focus on one thing. You can't get your mind off it, and I just see one thing, that if I went a little faster, I'd die. That would make me more scared, and the more scared I got, the faster my heart would go. The faster it would go, the more scared I'd get. The more scared I get, the faster it would go. A vicious circle. And my protection was, if necessary, would be to wake up my wife and just ask her casually to tell me the events of the day. It's a stupid kind of a question, but she said, Mrs. Patterson came while I was hanging up the clothes out there, and she told me that her uncle was coming to see her. I said, that's nice, go ahead. And the more I'd listen to her, the more I'd forget my heart, and presently I'd get down all right. After a while, it came to the place that just to know that she was there, and that I could waken her, would bring it to pass. Well, even while this was going on, and I had these dreams that I was going to heaven, so I said, Lord, I'm going to start living in the kingdom. But the palpitation would continue every night. And then they're calling a call to go to, I wrote the book, The Soul's Sincere Desire. Came the call to be one of the leaders in the YMCA Middle West Conference, to go to the Lake Geneva, 8 states represented, and 800 boys. And I went, and the cabins were nothing but canvas tents with canvas marking off the rooms. And the next canvas next to me was Pitt Van Dusen, who's now president of the Union Theological Seminary, and over here was Kirby Page. And that palpitation come on, I knew I could just speak through the flap of the canvas and just say to Pitt Van Dusen. I could call on him if I needed it. And I got through all right. But there came to me a delegation from the Rocky Mountains and asked me to come out there and give to those messages to the boys and girls. There they had a coeducational summer camp week for the colleges of the Rocky Mountain area. And I said, how high above sea level is it? And they said 8,000 feet. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I'll not be able to go there. And other things prevent my being there. And Pop, Elliot, Dad Elliot, who had been a wise secretary when I was still a student, and he came to me and he said, I've heard what you said, and I don't think you have a moral right to decline a request like that of young men and women. And God has given you a message like this. Well, that added my conscience. Between the palpitation of my conscience and the palpitation of my heart, things were getting rather bad. So I finally sent word that I would come. And when I said goodbye to my wife and 3 little children at the railroad station, I looked long into their little eyes and thought, now, you may never see your daddy again. When I got on the train, I felt like the soldiers in the First World War going over the top at the 0 hour. And when I arrived at Estes Park, the most gracious hostess I think I ever met said, we feel so honored to have you come. We're going to give you a special little cabin off all by yourself. And I said, well, who's going to sleep in there with the other leaders? Oh, Henry Pitt Van Dusen and Kirby Page. They'll be in there with the hoi polloi. Now, I'd studied Greek. I knew what the hoi polloi meant, the common herd, so I said, I love the hoi polloi. I said, please let Pitt Van Dusen have that. No. I argued. The only thing, I've discovered something, you can't argue with women. They don't understand, really, what you're talking about. All she did was to put this through the filtration of her adoration for a man of prayer. And the more I talked, the more I went up as, in her estimation, as the humblest, the modest, the most modest man in the universe, so I had to go out there. I could hear no one could hear me. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my heart going like a wheel in the factory with the belt off, nothing to stop it, nobody to talk to. Oh, yes, there was God. And I looked out the window, and I could see a great snow-capped mountain, and I said, Lord, you put me out on a limb. I'm your man, nobody's else. I'm entirely yours. So the rest of my life, I dedicated it when I came to 42, that everything I do would be for the kingdom. I was just going to live in the kingdom, and yet you put this palpitation upon me in spite of that. Must be trying to hurry me into it. And from now on, everything I do is going to be for you and your glory. I've written a book, one book, The Soul's Sincere Desire. I hope to write another one. Maybe it'll be on, I will lift up mine eyes to the hills. And, but I'm your man. If you want to take me to heaven tonight, take me along. But remember this, Lord, if anything happens to me, it'll be your hard luck and not mine. When I came down from Estes Park, my palpitations stopped. That was 30 years ago, and has never come back. All I know is that if you think there's a burglar under the bed, ladies, look there first. Before you telephone for the police. I know one spinster did that, and she's very much disappointed to find there wasn't one. But at any rate, face your danger and laugh it away, or put yourself utterly in the hands of the Lord, is just an opportunity to go all the way. And what way, the only way I'm going to tell you very honestly, very frankly, I say it's easy. I'm talking as though it's an easy thing to become an angel and get cured of that amnesia. The only way to do it is to go all the way, 100%, not 99% or not 98%, but all the way. And I attended church for 40 years as I would attend a middle-class Rotary Club. I had to go and get my little weekly stint. 1 hour was all I could take of religion. It's all that most people can take. When I was over in India, I found that they will have to talk with us up until midnight. They talk it day and night. And therefore, when you get them really inoculated with Jesus, you really got something. And Pakistan the same way. And the Muslims, they pray 5 times a day, and they're rather disgusted with the so-called Christians. We have sent Jay Baird and his wife and their 2 little boys over there, and they've been to Camps Farthest Out, and they, you know what they're called? The other Christians say they're heavy Christians. They rather keep a little away from them. They just want to go to church once a week. But the Muslims love them and respect them. There's a closer bond between the Muslims and the Hindus that go all the way out to find their God, and Christians do the same. And when you get there, then what happens? Then they begin to really honestly listen to you. Before that, they say, if your Christ is just a little Sunday morning thing, we don't care for him. But when they find it's a living thing, and that people who believe in those promises and believe that prayer can be answered, and what's more, they find the prayers are answered more powerfully with the heavy Christians and with the heavy Muslims, and the heavy Muslims come in, and well, I want to say that I just had wonderful experiences. Worshipper of Zoroaster came to our camp. She said, I love my Zoroasters, you love your Jesus. And she gave me a lot of books. And Zoroaster's philosophy was as beautiful as our Proverbs and most of our Psalms, but it had that limit. And she's just going to take Jesus back to them. She said, it'd be all right for us to use the Zoroaster for the Old Testament and Jesus for the New Testament? Sure. Why, we thought we had to wipe it all out and just lose all that old culture. I want to say very frankly that there's one branch of Buddhists that I think we could sweep them into Christianity by the million. They're very open to us. And they have a very fine spiritual philosophy, their philosophy. Let them keep it. I'm reading the New Testament, the Bible through, every page by page. And I'm just finishing the book of Psalms. And I want to say that Stalin never did anything more cruel or worse, or even Hitler burning up to 6 million Jews, than the Jews themselves, going into perfectly innocent villages because this land's been promised us, and killing every man, woman, and child, and if they didn't, the prophets would blame them. Perfectly innocent persons. Jericho was a perfectly innocent city. A harlot treacherously let them in, and they killed everybody there. I'm not saying that the Bible isn't a marvelous book, the greatest book in the universe, but I believe that we could write a third covenant. I wouldn't call it a third testament. For the 2,000 years that followed Jesus, if we can't go farther after Jesus came than those came before him and see more spiritual things, I've seen more saints walking this earth today than I could find in all my reading of the book of Joshua and the book of and the book of Samuel and all the rest. There's occasional prophets, but even Elisha got, when lots of children called him a bald head, he had the wolves come out and destroy them all. I have a bald head, but I don't think I'd quite do that, but I'm not going to run in competition with Elisha. But what I'm saying is this. I've discovered the time has come when we're one world. We've got to get our Christ. We've got to hold him up. Don't let him be held down by anything else, even the Old Testament. Pick out the wonderful things of the Old Testament, but don't need to take every one of those things. And we could have Christ take control of the world if we're heavy Christians. They are all respected. I've discovered this, that the whole world will listen to an authentic spiritual experience. The Atlantic Monthly was, every editor was an atheist. They simply would not take a religious article. But when I began living in the kingdom of heaven, at the age of, when I was 42, then is when the Soul Sincere Desire came out. A boy asked me how I prayed. I was just a teacher of English, a coach of athletes, and you people know how to pray, but you don't intend to write a book. I never intended to, but I'd learned how to pray in the kingdom of heaven, now that I'd become an angel. So I sat down and I said, Lord, you take and write this. The boy asked me how I prayed, and I sat down and I was amazed at what came out. They said, this is too good for us, why don't you send the Atlantic? Well, I had spent 12 summers writing an article for the Atlantic. I put all the knowledge of grammar and rhetoric I knew into it, sent it to the Atlantic, and they sent it back. I sent it to Harper's, and it's still back. But I hesitated. I knew the Atlantic didn't accept religious articles, but I finally mailed it. And you know what they said in effect? Well, we don't always believe these kind of things. We'll say this, that the world will listen to an authentic spiritual experience. When you get cured of your amnesia, you can walk right in and the world will listen to you. When we reached Netherlands, and we'd been in a great many talks, had 2 camps farthest out, we were amazed and delighted to get an invitation from the Princess of the Netherlands to come to the palace. And she was eager to listen to an authentic spiritual experience. We found no matter how these Mohammedans would come, or these Buddhists would come, these Hindus would come, and while they would all came perhaps to set against any statement that you'll have to become a Christian, that's the only way you'll get. That we're going, they'd say that's imperialism. You'll say the only way you can get anything is by kowtowing to you whites. We're not going to have any of that imperialism in religion. Well, we didn't say that. All we did was to tell of an authentic spiritual experience. And they'd all listen to it. Everyone would listen to it. I could tell them how I overcame my palpitation of the heart. They'd listen to it. And so I can see why Jesus began his Sermon on the Mount, giving a list of ways to become angels. 4 ways of getting kicked into it. Good bumps that'll cure your amnesia by heavy bumps. One was to become poor in spirit, a doormat. Let them walk all over you. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. The greatest good in the way that ever happened to me was the death of my brother. Spiritually speaking, I wouldn't be here, wouldn't have a Camp Farthest Out, if I hadn't had something that made me mourn, and that opened me for me to know there was a reality up there, and made me determined then that I was going to start living in the kingdom with my brother right away. And when I came to the period when I was supposed to step into heaven, the Lord said, well, you're practicing, we'll let you see how much you can live it here. And so these Camps Farthest Out come, and when you come here, you're living in the kingdom, and that's my little contribution. You come here from 18 different states, or 28 states, folks very carefully sifted and selected, all eager to walk in the footsteps of Jesus with love under God. And God is the definition, the only definition we have of him really is God is love. And you'll find that love is the most powerful force in the universe, that love brings everything into perfectly adjusted and harmonious relationship with everything else. So living in the kingdom means living in love. And when you do that, you know what happens? Every cell in your body commences to function in perfectly adjusted and harmonious relationship with every other cell. So my palpitations stopped. I found that when you live in love, that your ideas come in perfect sequence and perfect order, just the ideas that bring blessings to those that you're with. And so the result is, we're almost effortlessly 20 books, 30 books that I call the booklets have rolled off since I was 40. But since I was 60, they've been rolling off at the rate of about one every year. And I don't have any time to write except between 5 and 7 in the morning. Now, I'll tell you how this happens. I would go to my Bible class on Sunday, and they came not to hear eloquence, but to receive manna, as they called it. They came from 40 different churches, and I'd close 15 minutes at a time so they'd get their churches. But they came with expectancy, and it pulled out of me things so that I didn't have to prepare. When I'd go home, I'd say, that's a remarkable speech I gave. I didn't know where the ideas came from. Hardly. I'd take a note, a card, and I'd jot down an outline. Then I'd come and give it to the Camps Farthest Out. And after they'd heard it so much, they began to get bored, and I began to get bored. I'd sit down and put it into a book, and the result is my books just are written by the Bible class. And by living in the kingdom of heaven, the ideas come that way. And then another thing in the kingdom, the supply and the need always reside together. If there's a real need, there'll be a supply come rolling in. And so I don't worry about finances. We're ready now to send Roland Brown on a trip around the world, 9 months. He and Ray Graves, who's sitting in our midst here. And the money necessary to come is coming in, although most of it comes in as the honorariums that you folks give me at these camps. I have no use for them anymore, so I can put them in. And they're arranging marvelous meetings. They're going to be almost as big as Billy Graham's. They're just going to turn out all Cairo, the Christians, and then Rome is opening up, and everywhere. And they'll plow the ground so that they'll want in the following year for us to send the teams of folks, about 2 or 3 teams, to have Camps Farthest Out in near most of those places where he has been. Well, we don't need a tremendous sum now. We aren't sending teams, we're just sending 2 men. But another year, instead of using 10,000, I think we'd use 25,000. So I'm counting that that in some unusual way, 300 men are going to come to me and say, we want to join a new kind of Gideon's band. We want to, in 3 years' time, you think that you could bring a universal peace? And I say, yes, if we had $300,000 a year, we could do it. It'd take care of Koinonia and all its vast program. It could not only present these teams, but it could give us $25,000 extra a year for scholarships for every young minister and divinity student that wanted to come to camps.